There's John Whittle. Curveball, literally, curveball, throwing a curveball to you here, Mr. Baseball. Are you fired up for Bristol Motor Speedway hosting the Reds and the Braves on Saturday, where they're going to set a all-time attendance record? 85,000 tickets have been sold for this game.
Yeah, I was checking out the pictures here just a little bit earlier, and pretty sweet looking deal. So yeah, I might tune in for an inning or two, see what it looks like out there. I think it's a pretty neat thing that they're doing, and trying to bring some different exposure to the sport.
You got to figure the executives in Bristol were kind of hoping the Braves would be more like 60-44 as opposed to 44-60 for this game, but it's not slowing down the rubbing is racing folks. They're all going to show up and probably have tank tops on and lots of beer and stuff like that. And I don't know. Is there a good seat for this thing? It looks like they've got some that they've built in there, but the rest of it.
I think some of it's fine. I mean, that track is only so big. I think the field fits in pretty nicely.
Okay. All right. Do y'all like this, Mike? Do we need more of this? And do they need to play a football game at Bristol? Because they did, right?
I thought they have.
Didn't they play? That's what I'm saying. Did they need to do
Virginia Tech, Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. When was that? 10 years ago? Was it that long?
Oh, not that long.
Wasn't that long.
No, about 5 maybe.
Yeah.
Look, it's one of 162. Baseball, I think, needs all the help it can get to kind of spicing things up a little bit at that point. And in this case, the Reds are going nowhere, and the Braves have been probably the most disappointing team in the sport. They're the third or fourth worst team in the National League, and now their entire opening day rotation is all on the shelf. So, yeah, at this point, they could play the game on Mars. It's not going to matter a whole lot. Braves fans are mourning the loss of a season at this point.
At least
I went to a race in Bristol one time. Never a NASCAR fan, but a buddy of mine, Sean Bishop, shout out, high-ranking guy with Pepsi. Brother Kyle is a football coach assistant, and I think at Berea High School up in South Carolina. But went to a race one time, sat fifth row, and it was incredible. It was incredible. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Wasn't really a fan of the sport, just like going to sporting events. And, I left. Right now I've got a little bit of a sunburn. But when I left there, my arms were gray from all the tire soot and tire rubber that was all over me. So it was a really neat experience.
I'm like you, John. I'm not a huge auto racing person in general, but the wife and I did F1 last year in Miami. And that was pretty cool. It's one of those things you're either in person to experience it and feel it. Because you really do feel it. When those cars go by at that speed, you actually feel it. So I could be convinced to go to a couple more, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Why not?
I'd like to see one of those myself. We're going to see the Gamecocks on August the 31st in Atlanta, Georgia. Camp starts this week. John, what are your top storylines for this football team?
Going to be hot this week. Look forward to getting out there. We get to watch a little bit. Yeah, we get to watch a little bit on the 1st, the 2nd, and then I think the 8th and the 10th is when it's open to the media. 4 days for about 3 periods. But I mean, I know y'all were talking a little bit earlier when y'all were talking about Clayton White, but I just want to go out there and see what things look like from a defensive leadership standpoint, and personnel wise too, obviously. But you look and you think about the type of leadership that was lost on that defense last year. Whether it's Nicky, Email Warrior, O'Donnell, Fortune. I mean, you lost your top 2 vocal guys and top 2 leaders at every level with Debo Williams, Demetrius Knight, Alex Huntley, Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders. I mean, you lost talent in those guys, but those guys just ran the show. Clayton White did a phenomenal coaching job last year, but he didn't have to coach real hard. I don't think, when you have guys like that who have been around for so long and who have such respect of their teammates, that makes your job so much easier as a coach. So I mean, ton of credit to Clayton White, but ton of credit to those players too. And, I think that's not only is a talent a big loss, but losing so many guys who were just so good at leading others, knowing where to be, knowing where everybody should be. I think that's just such a big deal.
Yeah, I agree with that. And they now add Jeff Collins to the mix. So whoever puts the media guide together for Gamecock football, Steve's going to have to get him back in the lab. They're going to have to get that remade. What
do you do it digitally? I think they can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
We won't get a new printout.
No.
I'm surprised we still get I'm surprised we still get the books. They don't make them for any other sport but football. But I'm happy to get that a little bit later this week.
I'm glad they do though, because I like to collect them. I love looking back on all kinds of stuff. So, what does this add in your mind other than experience? For what it's worth, here's some numbers, and then you can answer the question. What do you think he adds to the staff? I'd say immediately and long term. On this staff, there are 24 years of collegiate head coaching experience. Okay, with Beamer, Sean Elliott, Mike Fury, Mike Shula, and Jeff Collins all being, well, once a current head coach, all being former head coaches. And for what it's worth, even though Jeff Collins didn't coach in the NFL, there's 112 years of NFL coaching experience on this roster. I mean, on this staff, which is pretty remarkable. So what does Jeff Collins in your mind add in the short term and then potentially in the long term?
Well, I think when you bring in a guy like Jeff Collins and like y'all were talking about with Nick Saban doing that so many times over at Alabama, I think you have to have a guy who fits pretty well and isn't going to step on toes. I mean, you've got defensive coordinator already, you've got position coaches already, and they've done a good job. So you've got to have guys who are a good fit. And I think that's probably what this is. I mean, Clayton and Jeff Collins have worked together before and have a relationship. Same with Shane Beamer. So I think that's a big deal that makes these situations work. So, I am encouraged by that. And, I don't. There may be something to what you were saying earlier about Clayton White taking a job and Jeff Collins being ready there to step in. And, I think that's probably a big deal with Mike Shula on offense. So many times when you hire a new offensive coordinator, you really have to figure out what makes guys tick, especially your quarterback, and figure out how to keep them in the right headspace and maximize their abilities. And sometimes that takes a minute to figure out. And sometimes that changes when the bullets start flying of the season. But with Mike this year, he knows that, he's been down on the sidelines for a year with Lenoris and knows what buttons to push. So I think that's a huge deal. And if it works out that way with Jeff Collins next year or the year after, then, maybe that's a good thing. But I don't know that is, the number one deal, but that's certainly a little side benefit for sure.
His defenses at Florida were elite, top 10 defenses back-to-back years when he was with the Gators in 15 and 16. By the way, the Cicadas are a wonderful addition to the program.
Run, John. Run for your life.
Now
it's a plague.
Screened in porch. I don't got to run.
Now that the bird's taking a hike, this is this, and I really don't care. I cicadas are, I hear them all the time. They go in one ear and out the other to me. But all right, you mentioned Mike Shula. I want to read you something. Grace Rayner. We all know Grace, who's with The Athletic now, and she wrote a column just a couple of days ago. Landon Duckworth's South Carolina recommitment, another reminder of QB recruiting drama. And there was I'm not going to read the entire article here. Again, it came out on July the 25th, but I'm going to pull something in here that she wrote, which makes you think about things maybe a little bit differently with what's going on at this position right now at the University of South Carolina. Clearly, the year has not been played. We don't know what it's going to look like. We think we do, but we don't. With Lenore Sellers and so on and so forth. And we have not seen Landon Duckworth yet in a uniform. But here's I'm pulling this from this column. However, as South Carolina has proven, maybe better than any other program in the country these past few years, The chaos of QB recruiting isn't always bad. Things are looking up in Columbia for a South Carolina program hoping to enter the college football playoff picture, and the quarterback position is arguably the biggest reason why. Quarterback recruiting isn't all about high school recruiting, as we all well know. And if you go back in the last few years, they lured Spencer Rattler out of the portal. I know that Robbie Ashford really only played in one game here, but he was a big pickup out of the portal. Air Nolan has been a big pickup out of the portal. They recruited Lenora Sellers and have developed him, and now they've got Landon Duckworth. So do you think that this article written by Grace Rayner in The Athletic, does South Carolina have an argument for maybe doing the best job at creating the quarterback position in college football?
That would require me to probably know a little bit more about the rest of the country than I do to make that statement. But you got to feel like South Carolina's done a pretty tremendous job in what they've done. And, you didn't even mention the fact that Lenora Sellers' recruitment wasn't exactly straight up. He was committed to Syracuse for so long. And, I don't remember the exact timeline, but it was pretty darn late that South Carolina ended up offering him and flipping him from the Orange. So, I think South Carolina and they've had several different quarterback coaches at this point now too, right? You've had your Satterfield and your Loggins and now your Shula. I mean, you've had some guys who have figured out how to land players at that position. So I don't even think you mentioned Cutter Woods either, and he was probably the guy coming out of the spring who he probably had, at least in my estimation, at least as much hype as Aaron Noland coming out of the spring. So, that backup quarterback battle is going to be really interesting. You throw in Luke Doty in there too. And not that he projects long-term, but, if you need somebody short-term, he might just be the guy because the other two guys talking about Nolan and Woods, you got to grow those guys up a little bit. So, for God forbid something happened with Lenoris, but Doty's right there as well. So, I think South Carolina's certainly in a really good spot, in terms of, comparing it nationally, that's a great question for Mike and JC, but I'll tell you this, like, it's hard for me to imagine, or it's hard for me to remember South Carolina being in a much better spot than where it is right now. There's certainly been some good ones here at times, but the string of guys that they're on and the way they've come and kind of developed, I think has certainly been really positive development for the program. And we've seen plenty that if you have a great quarterback, you have a darn good chance to be a pretty darn good team.
Mike, I think again, it hasn't all played itself out, so we're projecting a little bit here, clearly. But to John's point, like if you go back, we already mentioned Zeb Nolan, right? And then remember they had to kind of they played a trick on everybody basically and threw DeCarrion in there to win a bowl game. And prior to that, Luke Doty kind of had to rush out there and play quarterback, and they brought in Colin Hill from Colorado State because they didn't have a quarterback. And remember, they kind of got Jake Bentley in here early and kind of threw him to the wolves in his career. I don't know that there's been like a setup like this, if you want to call it that way, or kind of a pecking order since right after Spurrier got here. I mean, once Steven kind of took control of that room, and then you started to see Connor, you knew who the next quarterback was. And then when Connor would go down, you started to see Dylan, you knew who the next quarterback was going to be. And then that was kind of it. But it feels like we're maybe we're touching that cycle again because we knew it was going to be Sellers after Spencer Rattler. We don't know who's going to be next, but it certainly seems like they put themselves in a prime spot for somebody to win that job, not be forced into it.
Yeah, I mean, like John said, I don't recall. I mean, I go back to covering this program closely to the late 90s, but even before that, I remember the older fans out there and listeners will remember the name Dickie DeMacy.
Yeah,
that was the backup to Todd Ellis. That didn't go so hot, with all due respect. You go back to the Brad Scott years. they were always a quarterback injury away from the season imploding. Lou Holtz, kind of the same thing. And much of Spurrier's tenure, too. I mean, fortunately, they didn't have the amount of injuries at the quarterback spot for much of Steve's 10.5 years holding the clipboard. But when you look at the stable now, and again, we're just basing this on recruiting rankings and everything. These guys haven't done anything.
No.
However, it's looking more and more. It's closer to a Georgia, Bama, Texas quarterback room than it is a Vanderbilt, Missouri, Mississippi State quarterback room, just based on what they've been able to bring in from a pure talent standpoint. So obviously that's big on two fronts. Number one, yeah, of course, if Lenoris gets hurt, you want to have a plan. And then number two, it just helps the transition because nobody expects Lenoris to be around after this year now. It helps the transition going from one quarterback to another as opposed to like, okay, our blue chip quarterback's gone. I don't know. I guess we're just going to we just have a competition. Like the elite programs now, they're no longer having those setback years or competition years because what does an Ohio State do? They just go in the portal and grab one. You know, I mean, that's right. What – or if you're Texas, you give Arch Manning $4 million to sit on the bench and be a spot player, but you hang around for the next year. That's your opportunity, which is 2025. That's not reality for 99% of the college football programs out there. So I think it's lined up as good as it's ever been lined up.
Very similar to Charlie Whitehurst, who I think is probably has one of the greatest sports positions in the history of any sport. I mean, he just hung around and made like $50 million as a backup quarterback in the NFL forever.
Oh, yeah.
Genius.
Touchdown Jesus.
The guy was genius.
Clipboard Jesus.
Yeah, clipboard Jesus. Is he still doing that? I mean, nobody would know.
I think he's done.
I think he got like 50 million.
Probably like running a hot dog cart in Akron. I don't know what he's doing anymore, but no, he made a great living at it. That is for sure.
My man Michael Flint has always said the best position in sports is the third string quarterback in the NFL because you're not going to play. If the second string guy goes down, guess what? They're going to sign a dude. You just hang out over there and we'll pay you to do it.
The third string guy in the NFL now is not even active.
Right.
So you're the third string guy. You don't have a uniform.
Yeah, you're just chilling.
Yeah, you're totally chilling.
Goodness knows the situations are very different. Clemson's bringing back a pretty darn good quarterback this year. But did I see over the weekend that Clemson's activating a graduate assistant quarterback to be on their roster? Did I see that right?
I don't know.
Oh, I missed that.
I did too. Is that true?
I think so.
Oh, who do we need to call to confirm this?
Yeah,
Phil.
Oh, okay.
I'll Google it real quick.
That's all right. We got Google working behind the scenes here. Real quick here on the Collins thing, the on-field coaching limits. Those are no more in college football, right? Like the 10 on field, you can have whoever you want out there. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Okay. That's what. So he can be out there hands-on and actively doing things.
Are there any restrictions for an analyst anymore?
Few. Yeah. And I don't know what they are, but there. I mean that was part of the deal with Greg Atkins. A couple years back, like he's able to take a much more active role on the field and help out with the offensive line.
It makes sense because you can never convince me like those guys were not more actively involved in things that they were supposed to be by the letter of the law.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
How do you police that? I mean,
you don't.
What are you
somebody turns you, a disgruntled player turns you in and says, yeah, he was actually recruiting and drawing up plays. Well, an analyst can't recruit. That's still a rule, isn't it? Or is it not?
I think so.
I
don't think they can go on the road.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's pretty hard to recruit if you don't do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can meet with them on a visit. Yeah. I think you can do that, but you can't be out there going to high schools. And I think maybe that's all changed. Hell, I can't keep up with the the rules. I'm having a hard enough time figuring out all the rules on paying players. I'm not sure exactly what the letter of the law is on analysts anymore.
All right, so here's Phil's response to it's Hunter Helms. Hunter Helms, who grew up and played in Columbia. Well, you know who Hunter Helms is, John. Mike, I'm not sure if you know who Hunter Helms is or not, but he was already there, graduated, or I think or maybe he transferred. Did he transfer and then transfer back in as like a GA? And now they've placed him on scholarship, according to the Greenville News, is what Phil says, for emergency purposes. Okay. Whatever. We've been there before. Know how that feels.
Yeah, totally different situation. They got a pretty good starting quarterback over there.
Yeah,
and
they're not relying
they activated Zeb to compete for the starting job, and obviously started several games. But I just thought it was interesting. I just thought it was interesting.
Well, the Nolan thing too, which is crazy. Do you remember when that happened? We were kind of told like this. That's for emergency purposes only. The guy ended up being the starting quarterback. I think it might have been you who was like, yeah, I'm not sure I'm buying that. I think this guy actually is going to play for South Carolina. And most of us thought there's no chance he's going to see the field. But sure enough, he trotted out there and brought him back to win. Was it the Vanderbilt game?
Vandy.
Yeah. Which would have, that was a bad Vanderbilt team. That would have been a really rough loss.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying. I'm going to ask a question that I pretty much know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it a little bit differently. Because practice starts at the end of this week, would you anticipate in the next 3 or 4 days we get an answer on Rashaud Faison for South Carolina?
The NCAA operates when it feels like operating. I mean, there was like we talked about last week, there was some hope and optimism for several reasons that there was going to be a ruling, I guess a week before, I guess 10 days ago, 12 days ago. That didn't happen. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know when it's going to happen. The NCAA got some finalized information that week, and you thought that they'd be able to make that call pretty quickly after receiving that, but either they have and it came out poorly and South Carolina hadn't announced it, or they haven't heard back yet. So, I think as soon as South Carolina hears whether good or bad, we'll know pretty quickly. But I'm not. The NCAA doesn't operate on the preseason practice timeline, unfortunately.
So we had Darren Usher on last week for a long time, as you know. I asked him a question. He didn't. I don't know if he didn't know the answer. I'm pretty sure he did, but I believe that he elected to let Shane Beamer answer that question. Maybe he'll get asked this today, John. If he is not cleared by the first practice, which is on Saturday, I believe, right? If he's not cleared, can he practice?
Well, if Darren Usher's not going to answer it, then I'll let Shane Beamer answer it later too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I don't know for sure. I think so, but I don't know for sure. These NCAA rules change every day, and I don't know the answer to that question with regards to Rahsul. So I'm not going to pretend that I do.
All right. What do you have coming up this week on the Big Spur?
Well, we have Birdies with Beamer today. We'll head out there and talk with a bunch of assistant coaches and hear from Shane. And I'm sure Rahsul will be talked a little bit about. We get to watch basketball practice on Wednesday. So that'll be nice. We were supposed to be able to do that a little earlier this summer, but ended up not being able to. But we'll be able to do that on Wednesday morning, late morning. So then you got practice starting August 1st, right? And we'll be out there on the practice field. So, there's going to be a whole slew of football in the build up to the start of this thing over the course of the week. And I'll sprinkle a little basketball in there too for those folks.
Your reporting last week, by the way, on basketball, you reported that Mongolian Mike Sharavjamps, who has transferred in, and Michi. Is it your understanding that they will, I don't know about exact 50-50, but they will share the point guard position?
I think you're going to see Michi listed as point guard, but I think you're going to see Mike handling the ball quite a bit. I won't go so far to say 50-50, but I think a lot more than what folks have probably anticipated. But Michi's back and practicing a little bit. He's getting going. He missed the first couple of months of the summer with the little back issue going on, but he's working his way back into it and into some on-court action, and so he's ready to go. And Chris Dessendoko, who was back at home in France until I guess it was about 10 days ago. It was either not this past Thursday or Friday, but the week before, he was back at home in France, and now he is on campus and doing his thing. So, there's some things going on over there with the hoops team as well.